Let's see. Yes, indeed, we have landed everywhere we're supposed to be. Welcome to Creative on Purpose Live, conversations with insightful difference makers that inspire a life of greater intention and impact. I'm your host, Scott Perry, Chief Difference Maker at Creative on Purpose. If you're ready to get clearer and closer to what you want in life and business, visit creativeonpurpose.com to get started today. Let's meet today's guest. Mark, welcome to the broadcast. Please tell our viewers who you are, what you're up to these days, and where can people go to learn more about you and the difference you're making.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Mark Truitert. I was an Olympic athlete from the Netherlands. I became Olympic champion in speed skating in 2010. That's a big sport in our country. And I always adopted the principles of Stoicism throughout my career, which spanned like around 15 years. I quit speed skating 10 years ago, and afterwards I found out that these same Stoic principles still help me today. So when I was speaking in front of audiences, people would ask me about Stoicism. I would always refer to the original texts, which of course are beautiful to read, but then I thought, hey, maybe it's time to put my own experiences into writing and give my own personal outlook on this philosophy and how I use this philosophy in my life. So I'm an entrepreneur. I give commentary on television. I have my own podcast, Drive Podcast. I write, I speak, I do all sorts of things. But the main thing which I always come back to is practical philosophy. So besides being an athlete, besides loving sports, practical philosophy really helps me. How do you say? Find some common ground or some clearance in the muddy waters of life.
Well, fantastic. I appreciate that you giving us that overview. I'm always curious about how people come to be doing what they're doing, but I'm also curious about the path that you've navigated through to get to where you are now as a speaker and an author, and that involves being an Olympic athlete and an Olympic champion. We've had other Olympians here. Dr. Jeff Spencer has been on the show. He comes to mind, and I'm just curious about, in terms of that piece of your journey, how did that come to be? Was little 9-year-old Mark sitting in his bedroom dreaming of becoming an Olympian way back then, or is it something that involved a more circuitous path?
Well, when I was young, I was always out on the ice when it would freeze over, and well, that used to happen a lot. Still happens less, but I loved to go out speed skate. I love the speed. I love to challenge myself, but I was not really that talented. So when I first entered races, when I was 12, 13 years old, I was not Olympic material, so to say. So I never really thought about becoming an Olympic champion. Of course, I watched all the big athletes on TV, and these athletes inspired me. But after years, when I was 16, 17 years old, and if you love something, you get better at it, right? You do it more often, you get better at it. So for me, that's when it really happened. I became an athlete, a professional athlete, when I was 18, 19 years old, and not because I was that talented, but because I loved to do it, and I love to do it every day. And I had some willpower in me. So I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted to get better. And that actually helped me to really made a steep curve when I was around 17, 18 years old. So that, slingshot me into a professional career as an athlete when I was 19, 20 years old. And I was one of the biggest talents in my country and in the world right then. So I was so ambitious. I was just giving it all I had. But I faced some struggles with that too.
Well, and I'm sure that I guess the other part of this equation that I'd love to dive into is I was introduced to Stoicism at a very young age. I was in the 7th grade when a teacher gave me a copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations, and it really has informed and inspired everything I've done since then, which has included college athletics and a career as a teacher and a career as a musician and now as an entrepreneur, coach. When did Stoicism and how did Stoicism enter your consciousness and start informing and inspiring what you do?
Well, I always loved history in classes at school, besides sports. So sports history always had my fascination. And when I was 20 years old, I was a big athlete. I was training for the Olympics in 2002 in Salt Lake City in the US. I signed a big contract with my sponsor, so there was a lot of pressure on my shoulder, and of course also self-created pressure. Every interview I got, I shouted from the rooftops, "I'm going to win Olympic gold." But I was always also struggling at home with my situation at home. I was living with my parents still, who were going through a divorce. I literally fought with my father. I helped my mother. So I was in between these two people I loved as the oldest son of my parents. I have two younger brothers. And that was a chaotic situation for me. That was like a pressure cooker. And I fled into the one thing I thought I could control. So for me, it was training harder, training harder, training harder. I had blinders on. And I didn't go to the Olympics in 2002. I was severely overtrained. I just tore my body down. I wore it out. I was sick all winter. So I couldn't train. I needed to take a rest. I didn't go to the Olympic Games. And I was really struggling with that. I was like 20, 21 years old, full of ambition. And I was grounded. And my parents were fighting and things were going wrong. And I had this much pressure. So I thought, yeah, I was really searching for myself in life, being a young guy stepping onto the stage. And then I couldn't train, but I could read. So then the first texts I read were about psychology, philosophy, etc. And I learned a lot about them. And there was a text from Marcus Aurelius which really struck a chord with me. That was the impediment to action advances action, what stands in the way becomes the way. How Marcus writes about dealing with setbacks, dealing with challenges from his own personal standpoint, being an emperor, being the mighty man he is, with the pressure on his shoulders. How he deals with that really inspired me. I thought, hey, that's a different way of looking at life, different way of using these obstacles that are on your path. When you're 20 years old, you think, hey, I have one goal. It's a straight line. Let's go there. And then you get halted, and there's a wall in between your path, and that's an obstacle. And Marcus Aurelius would say, well, good for you. There's the challenge for you on your path to find a new direction in life. And for me, I started looking at life more through the way Marcus Aurelius looked at life, I think. So he inspired me, and that's only the beginning of me discovering Stoicism. It took me, I think, 8 to 9 years from then to learn about all the Stoics and to really let all these pieces of this beautiful philosophy, these pieces of the puzzle, fit in with each other. And that helped me really to find myself and to have a clear direction in life where I wanted to go to, not only winning, not only a gold medal, but who I was as a person, and that helped me to also become a better athlete. So I found that a fascinating journey.
Yeah, that's really well, it's really interesting because my experience with colliding with Marcus Aurelius was very similar. It wasn't necessarily directly associated with Stoicism because he never really mentions the philosophy. He talks about his teachers and he talks about this approach to the art of living and navigating challenges and so forth. But the thing that struck me that it sounds like was also resonating with you is the way that, Meditations is a journal, and the way that Marcus was speaking to himself was very resonant with the conversations I was having with myself in my own head. And so it was always really fascinating to me that someone from, an entirely different time in history, who was in a very different position, was having the same conversations and the same desire to improve themselves and to fulfill their potential that I was having as as a young teenager. So that part is really fascinating to me. I got into, I kind of collided with Epictetus in a similar way when Sharon LaBelle's translation of Epictetus's discourses came out as under the title "The Art of Living." I didn't really, again, associate it with Stoicism. It was just here's some pithy pieces of advice coming from this old guy that's a little crotchety and direct. I love that part of it. I want to bring up the book. So Mark has just recently published The Stoic Mindset. It's a beautiful little, I love books that are this size.
Yeah.
I actually published something very similar. And it's very, like Marcus Aurelius, it's very approachable. It's very actionable. And I'm just curious about, tell us a little bit about the journey to having this
Yeah.
come to be, and what are some of the lessons that are inspired by your life as an athlete that made its way into this book.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always had a dream about writing a philosophy book, and then talked to a lot of philosophers here in Holland. I know also comedians, athletes, people I know. I know a lot of people here in Holland, of course, and they all told me, "Well, Mark, don't write that philosophy book. Write a book about your personal journeys, about your personal stories." So I learned a lot about dealing with setbacks from being an athlete, but also being a son and facing my father, having to deal with the anger I felt towards him. I blamed my father for the divorce of my parents. Dealing with these high pressure situations, being an athlete when the world watches you. And I think I found the beauty in Stoicism. It's like, it's not one principle, there are all life principles that fit into each other. It's a pretty logical system, which I love. And I love the way the Stoics we know of. Sadly, we don't know of a lot of old texts about Stoicism, but what we know of, Marcus Aurelius was an emperor practicing Stoicism. Epictetus was a slave who had to deal with situations and learned Stoicism from Rufus, who was the modern day Socrates in Rome. And we know of Seneca, of course, who is a beautiful writer. And for me, it's the same, like Stoicism. It fit later in my life. And it all came back to this philosophy. So I thought I have to write something down, because I see so much people facing challenges in their life, dealing with mental draining things, mental energy, emotional energy, besides physical energy. Having to navigate through the chaos of modern day living, having to focus without watching on our phones all day, connecting with other people instead of judging them. Seems so natural to do right now. If you look at the news, if you look at social media, if you look at headlines, it's all judging, right? So yeah, I think there's a beauty in stepping back from all of that, stepping back from the personal, from the high pressure situation of sports, the gold medals, I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I think this of that, blame politicians, etc. But step back from all of that, from all that noise, and find some direction in that clutter, and find some connection with other people. So instead of judging, and that's a principle I write about in my book, Judge Less, Understand More. That's a hard thing, a hard lesson I had to learn. And I thought that this has nothing to do with sports, but it made me a better person and a better athlete by not judging my father. I judged my father. He was a bad person. I blamed him for everything that happened in my life up to I was 25, 26, all the bad things, right? I blamed him for that. And I read Epictetus, and Epictetus really says this in a beautiful way, right? He says, you should honor your parents. It's also fated, right? It's the parents that are your parents. You didn't get to choose them. So this is fate. You are bound to your parents. So instead of judging them, or you can accept that's the way it is. And not only accept the way it is, but also try to love it and try to understand it. So for me, that was a big thing. What Epictetus talks about, the judgment we carry, that forms our emotions. It's not the person, it's not the event. No, it's our judgment about the event that is the flame for our emotions. So my anger has got nothing to do with my father, but with my judgment of my father. And for me, that was like, whoa, that's a different way of looking. I never looked at it like that. But if you do that and you reflect upon these things, you have to ask yourself questions. Am I a better father 20, 30 years down the road? Do I know what it means to not have any contact with your sons for 6 years? No, I don't know that. So instead of judging him, it's wiser to ask him questions. And when I did that, that connection established again. And for me, that freed myself up. There was so much freedom in there. Build a connection with my father. I was not angry anymore. I can tell you that's a better way of living, not
Mhm.
being angry. So it freed me up. And I think that's the beauty of Stoicism. When you look at the way you look at life, take responsibility for your own thoughts, actions, and emotions that come from your judgment, then you can get rid of these negative emotions, these burdens on your shoulder, and life becomes better. You have more room for joy. You have more room for connection with other people. You have more room to fulfill your own potential. And that's for me the missing link. When I was a great athlete when I was 25, 26, but when I won gold in 2010, I was not only a great athlete, I was more relaxed. I was in contact with myself, with my father, with my mother, with my brothers who were there. So for me, that was a big uh, turning point in my life, actually.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's the fundamental promise of Stoicism is that freedom from desire, freedom from want, freedom from need, um, freedom from attachment to our desires and external validation and all these things. It's possible, and a lot of it comes through what you're speaking to, which is our ability to allow what is happening without ascribing judgment to it, and it is super powerful. I I I also I'm curious about this part of it, given your domain in athletics, because I don't think it's all that different from what I experienced as a professional musician. I mean, the conditioning and some of our human programming is about the fame and the fortune. We want the acknowledgement. We want the respect. We want the rewards that come with being on stage somehow. Um, and it turns out that if those are the things that you're chasing, in my experience, um, then even when you get them, it's never enough. And so, desire just continues, unhappiness persists, because you're never getting enough of these things that, most people would give up anything to have just a small percentage of. And
Yeah.
so it becomes more of a practice um, of being present and mindful in the here and now, and working the process. In my work, we talk about the process is the shortcut and the process is the reward. If you do the work with intention, with integrity, whatever results happen will happen. That's not really up to you. But what happens is that the intention and integrity of your process becomes its own reward. And it turns out that oftentimes when we're not attached to those external rewards, they kind of have a better chance of coming around for us anyway. So I'm just curious about that piece, in your experience as a professional athlete or as a Olympic
Yeah,
athlete.
I call it in my book, I think it's Principle 7, happiness is a byproduct, right? I come from a background where professional sports is about winning. And that's the goal of professional sports, it is. But to win, and that's Principle 3 in my book, win by not focusing on winning. To win, it's wiser to not focus about the end goal because it's not up to you. And that sounds like a paradox, right? What do you mean? Winning is not up to me. If I work really hard, I push everything I have in a race, I can beat all my competitors. No, you might not. There might be 3 guys in an Olympic final that are better than you are, and you gave it your all. That's the reality you have to live with because the goal is winning, but you can become fourth. That's the reality. So for me, there was so much
what we do sometimes, and probably as musicians, we can be entrepreneurs or athletes, we tie our own identity to that result, right? I can be, I'm the great rock star if people cheer for me. I'm a great athlete when people know I'm a gold medal winner, or I'm a great entrepreneur if I make a big profit or sell my company, etc. And that's really a trap because that's all ego, right? And we all have egos. We all want to be part of something, right? We all want to be of meaning. But there is a trap in there. If that is who you are or you become, that's the recipe for becoming unhappy, I think, because I've seen so much athlete who will think, if I'm there, then I will be happy. If I'm there, then I will be happy. It's not true. That's not the case. I know so many athletes are not happier when they win an Olympic gold medal. And that's not to say that doesn't mean anything. It's great. It's rewarding. It's fantastic. But a year later, it's another path you have to climb. There's another road. There's another obstacle. It's not the end of your problems. So happiness is not wishing an end goal that takes away all your bad feelings or all your problems. No, it's not. The struggle is the process, is the reward. If we struggle for something, if we put a lot of effort or energy into something with the people around us, with our teams, with the people we love, that's a reward in itself. The people who stood by me, and I didn't win any medals when I won my Olympic gold medals for 4 years. So if you stood by me, that was not by, there were a lot of parties to crash or moments to cheer or etc. No, but the people who stood by me really were focusing on the process. I became a better athlete in those 4 years. I learned a lot in those 4 years. And I didn't do that alone. I did it with my team, with the people around me. But that for me was the rewarding factor. And that all came tied together with the last minutes before my race. And that's actually the question I asked myself when I was on the Olympic race. Is what if it doesn't happen? What if I become fourth? Will it have been worth it? And I could honestly answer that question with yes, it has been worth it. The only thing I can do, and that's where I read a lot of Seneca before my races, is going back to my internal state of mind, the Stoics would say. That's up to me. So I can show courage. I can be courageous. That doesn't mean I don't feel fear. Of course, all these emotions are there, right? It's not to say as Stoics you push away these emotions. No, they're there, but how do you handle them? Are you swept away by that fear, or are you swept away by people cheering you on, or by the shining gold medal? No, you can turn inward and say, hey, I can show courage today. I can give it everything I have. I can execute the way I trained or have been training for 4 years, day in, day out. I can trust my team. I can trust the process and let go of all the outcomes. And again, that frees you up. That's for me, that was the part where I felt freed up and I was relaxed. So right before an Olympic Games, there's pressure on you before you race, right? So there's always, the tension is there. But if you can relax through that tension, you become a way better athlete. I don't cramp up. That's not part of my identity. I have to prove no one. This is me. This is on me. I want to show the world what I'm capable of, but I want to show myself. I want to show the people who are around. I want to show that this is the process we're finishing today. And that gave so much energy that for me, when I finished my race, there were still 4 athletes coming behind me or after me, two pairs. But when I finished my race, I was standing, of course, in first position, but I thought, wow, this is it. I gave everything I had. I couldn't go any faster. So whatever happens, happens. But this is all I have. And that was such a rewarding feeling for me.
I love that. It reminds me a little bit of, I actually closed one of my books with the archer metaphor from Cato, and the whole idea that the target is preferred but not sought.
Yeah.
And that really speaks to that experience. Well, as we're coming to the end of our half hour together, I have kind of a final question before the final question, and that is, now that the book is out, you're in this next career, as a speaker, as an author, and you're sharing your interest in and insight about Stoic philosophy. I'm just curious, as someone else that does work that's really informed and inspired by Stoic philosophy, how do you find the audience in terms of their receptivity to this, to anything that's associated with philosophy, period, but especially a philosophy that is, from antiquity?
Yeah, well, I'm speaking in front of all kinds of audiences, right? From every age, from every group.
And sometimes I really thought that when I began to talk about Stoicism, it's like, oh, people would think, oh, I didn't sign up for a philosophy class or something, right? I want to hear of this athlete and his stories. So that's why I call it the Stoic Mindset, right? It's an internal state of mind. It's a mindset. So that's what I talk about. And I weave into my stories the lessons I learned from Stoicism, from Marcus Aurelius, from Epictetus, from Seneca, etc., and so forth. So the resonance it's great, actually, and it comes from the part, I think, where I don't talk about gold medals, but
where I show my most vulnerable side. So
the thing I talk about, I lost my mother. She committed suicide when I was 31 years old, and that's a tough loss to bear. But I talk about that in my talks. I talk about dealing with my father and not seeing him. So I talk about death. I talk about struggles, and these are really, really personal things for me. And I had to learn to talk about them because there's taboo on that, or it's me, it's my. But when I did that, then it became personal. So for a lot of people, I think that resonated. So my personal stories and the lessons I learned from them, from Stoicism, that helped me to overcome these obstacles. I think that's what I get back. That's the most powerful thing. I think that's why I love Stoicism. I love philosophy, but I love that there are practical applications with who people from antiquity use, from a slave up to a king or emperor, right? That's crazy. That in all walks of life, from the ancient and probably up to millennia from now, people will still revert back to these principles, because these are, I think, life principles. There's so much wisdom in there that's there. So for me, it's a life philosophy, and when I talk about Stoicism, it's not like I want to tell people what Stoicism is and they should become Stoic. I want to encourage them to find their own life philosophy, because I think we all do. Maybe we're unconscious of it, but we all live by our own life's philosophy. And I would inspire people to read the Stoics, because they can really inspire you to, I think, find your own life's philosophy. So, and that's what philosophy, or practical philosophy, I think, is about. It's not a dogma. It's not, oh, look, live like this and then become Stoic. No. Find out, question it, learn from it, be inspired by it, use it. And that's what I try to do in my talks or in my book. So I hope people get inspired by it, dive into Stoicism, and find out that's a beautiful life philosophy. It's still really, meaningful for living today in our own chaotic times.
Fantastic. Well, again, the book is called The Stoic Mindset. It's available on Amazon and everywhere else you want to find books. And as we're wrapping up our conversation, Mark, the last question is always to just, this broadcast is being watched by people that, like you, are advancing entrepreneurs, or maybe there are people that are aspiring to get into some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor. And if there was just one, it could be a quote from your Stoic philosophy reading, or an exercise, what have you. If there's just one final tip, piece of advice, maxim that you would share that would inspire someone to step into possibility with a little bit more curiosity and courage, what would you share with them?
Well, maybe two short things. I always think about a big dream. I learned that from my American coach. If you have a big dream, a big vision on life, that's great, right? And if you aspire to be an entrepreneur or an athlete, you probably have that big dream, that big vision. You want to go somewhere. But what the Stoics would do, they would put beside
That big idea or big dream a negative visualization. So they would think about all the negative scenarios that could happen. So you're not blinded by it. Yes, you start out with a big dream with a lot of enthusiasm, with maybe companions, but things will go wrong. Things will clash. Things will be hard. There will be a struggle. You can count on that. So think about how you deal with the struggles. What if that struggle is on your path? See that struggle as the litmus test for your intentions, for your, for if do you really want that? You say you want it, but you don't know yet. You know it when the obstacles are on your path, and that's where the reality is made of. It's the big dream and it's the obstacles. So visualize through them, and not visualize through them in a sort of mental perspective like a picture, but
feel it. Try to feel what it means. When I was an athlete,
I really tried to visualize what does it mean when the Zamboni, the ice resurfacing machine, breaks down half an hour before the start. How do I deal with this? I learned this actually from fighter pilots who do this. What if you fly your F-16 or your fighter jet and
a rocket will
be aimed at you, and what do? If you have to react to these emotions, if you are forced to react under pressure, then you probably won't react in the best way possible or in the wisest way possible.
So think through that.
So you can find emotional calmness
and
a clean sheet or a clean sea, Marcus Aurelius would say. Then you can be calm and you make the best decisions. And what that decision is, it's up to you. But don't do it from
anxiety. Don't do it from chaos.
Learn to find that inner anchor and visualize the negative scenarios besides that big dream you have if you start.
I love it. That's fantastic. Well, Mark and I want to thank you for tuning in. We hope that today's episode inspires you to step a little bit more boldly into possibility and your potential in life, and to keep going with developing and defining and delivering on the difference that only you can make. Please visit creativeonpurpose.com. If you are watching on social media, please go ahead and leave a question, leave a comment, leave your biggest takeaway from this conversation. If you're listening on a podcast platform, please give us a 5-star rating and a written review. It really helps more of the right people collide with this content and the difference that my guests are making. Now, take the insight and inspiration from today's broadcast and play your game all in and full out. Mark, thank you so much for the benefit of your wisdom and experience today.
Thank you.